Hello.
Hi.
Hey, Claudio.
Just a quick question. Did Jing
Yeah.
get already the access?
I think she's been having some problems with the Duo thing. It seems like the link is not working.
Could you please ask her to send me what the issue is?
Sure. Let me forward that email. I think she was contacting Elizabeth about it.
Okay. Yeah.
Let me send you the email.
Okay. I can check.
Okay. I think it's time for that. Oh. Hello.
Hello, hi, this is Susanna. Hi again.
Hi, Susanna.
This is Dawei.
Hi, Dawei.
Hi, Dawei.
Hello.
I'm just waiting for the UT Health team to get on. So let me just email them. Hello.
Hi, Anu.
Hey, Nina. Nina, are Firat and Jing already in the room?
Yes, both of them are here.
Okay. And Hua?
No.
Okay. So I guess we can get started. On the agenda today, we'll just talk briefly about updates on action items, and then Susanna is on the call today because we would like to, or she will talk about DATS, the next version of DATS, which is basically version 3.0, and this is in connection to the no-cost extension work. So I think we'll probably have a pretty long discussion on that. The other thing that we also wanted to talk about is what we would like to do with reference to the GEO, because GEO has both data sets and it has series. So I think we are having some granularity issues when we are displaying duplicate data sets. So that's something that we want to discuss briefly. So on the action items, we are, as mentioned earlier, we have ongoing discussions with the Cedar Commons pilot folks. There's no meeting tomorrow, that was just cancelled. And we have they are actually looking into the DATS model and looking at the BioCaddy metadata fields that we have to see if that in itself is sufficient for their researchers to deposit data sets and the other two digital objects that they are interested in, which is software and workflows. For contacting repositories, Ian is going to be in touch with GDC and TCIA and also NDAR. I have gotten in touch with Richard Sherman, who was connected by Allison. What we need, and since Dawei is on the call, I'm going to ask right now, is to actually get in touch with somebody at Import so we can talk to them about how potentially deeper indexing could be done. Alejandra, I think, was supposed to get in touch with the IEDD folks. We've already gotten in touch with ICPSR and FITBIR. With regard to FITBIR, most likely we'll have Matt joining the CDP call next Tuesday. I've sent an email to him and I have not yet received the confirmation. But as soon as we have that, I think that's what will happen. So those are the updates. And Susanna, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you very much for creating also a slide, Anu. So practically, this is really come out from a discussion we were just having in the executive call earlier, and I was having with Alejandro and Philippe in the office this afternoon. So practically is that way. Also, this related to the conversation we had at the RDA. How do we get more people to use, DATS? How do we reconcile the work from the schema.org, what we have versus the granularity and everything else? So practically, and that's what I was proposing earlier to the executive team, which seems to be, supporting this direction, which is we want to go for a version 3, which has a proper alignment with schema.org. For this, I mean, at the moment we have a context file, a mapping file, but the idea would be that we still maintain the core and extended DATS, so that's become a profile, and the core of that, it's actually the schema data set representation, and the extended will use the existing additional metadata that we have in that, but simplifying the relations. But the reason we're going to do that, it's not just because to make this perfect alignment with the core DATS, with schema, to try to lure people more in, but also to simplify some relation. And this is somehow, it's part of the learning process of the mapping and the pipeline that the core team has done. So somehow it's looking into what the core team has learned by having to do all this mapping and creating a pipeline, and what actually ideally people should have, but the reality they don't have as metadata or as a relation, and therefore by simplifying the model, again, we get then people more interested in providing these additional metadata on top of the schema.org. Does it make sense?
Yeah, this is Dawei. I think yeah, that sounds a very interesting development, and I was looking forward to see how the repository will kind of respond to that.
Well, yeah, we want to see the same thing, but the thing is at the same time. So we were having this discussion with Ian as well, and Ian was saying yes, more people are becoming interested in schema.org. Not that everybody's jumping at it, but it seems that the interesting is raising. So if we are to further that, we are better off future-proofing by having the schema at the core of that, so that, assuming that their interest will grow from repository around schema because they will be indexed by Google as well, by providing additional metadata around that schema.org core, we might get more chance to get them to create the DATs export rather than the dev team having to continue to do the mapping. I don't know if Alejandro or Filippo are on the call and if they want to expand it more on that. They might not be on the call.
I think Filippo is on the call.
Maybe sometimes they call into the radio call and they have not called into the Skype yet. But anyway.
Just to let you know, I'm on the call, Susanna.
Okay. That's fine.
I don't think I need to add anything to what you said, but I just wanted to let you know I'm here.
Excellent. Thank you.
This is Filippo, and I think that Susanna said it all.
So I have a quick question. If we are going to be simplifying the extensions, does that mean we would also be adding like domain-specific metadata if we plan to do deeper indexing?
Filippo, perhaps if you can help me reply in this, you are best placed to.
Well, this is a kind of the crux of the issue somehow. What we feel is that some of the granularity of the existing DATs could be a hurdle for many adopters, and therefore anything that would make the production of the DATS document for discovery and indexing as simple as possible would help uptake and adoption. We have to weigh this against the specificity of some of the use cases, which require obviously more detail. And at the moment, I'd say the first goal would be to go for breadth rather than depth. So I think the holdback position would be to keep it as simple as we can, so to maximize uptake. It doesn't mean that we don't have the ability to provide descriptors for specific domains with specific profiles, but we would have to flatten a lot of things, like the current flattened version of what is loaded into DataMed for the LLP component, for instance. I think about these tags that Alejandro has been working on as well with Firat. And so this shows that sometimes less is more.
So, but in a sense, Filippo, you would if I understood, what Susanna was saying before, the core in a sense becomes smaller, right? And then the extended attributes become a bit larger because some of that was in the core falls into then the extended area. Is that sort of the shift?
Yes, I believe so. One medication point could be, for instance, simplification between data type and keywords and domain. So basically, these attributes at the moment do exist in DATS, but in a way they are the cause of a polymorphism. People don't know exactly where to dump this information, and there are many ways to do it. So either we need to take out, for instance, data type, which has a set of attributes as well, like platform, instrument, and things like that, and bubble them up in more explicit ways, and do things like that. Or simply rely on domain and keywords, because that's what people will be using to mark up the documents.
To me, the important thing we're doing here is closing the loop. Philippe just referred to the fact that we've got to weigh one thing against another. We can there's one force which is pushing us to minimize things, to make it easier for repositories to fulfill. And actually, in a way, the repositories are still the middle person in that, really this data originally comes from the people who generate the data. And so there's a pressure to, if they have to provide more, it takes more effort. But on the other hand, if they provide less, then whatever the search capability is less. So what I mean by the important thing here is to close the loop is, at the moment, with schema.org, I don't think we have a closed loop. We have a specification, and people are starting to mark up their pages with it. But what we want to do is expose, if you have this amount of metadata that you make available through schema.org, here are the kind of searches or indexing that's possible. And we need feedback on whether, from a functionality point of view, that's adequate, because then we're making the connection between what people want to do and in terms of search versus what they're prepared to provide. And we've got to get them engaged in the adult discussion of say, yeah, sure, if you want this, you have to provide this. And so closing the loop means that we're starting to expose and make searchable the sites that are providing schema.org markup, so we can see what searches are enabled, and people can provide feedback on DataMed as to whether those searches are adequate for what they want to do or not. And if they're not adequate, then we say, well, we can't do them because we don't have the metadata. And
so when you say people, Ian, are you talking about the end users or the repositories themselves?
The end users.
Okay.
So I didn't mean to cause a silence.
So I still am a little concerned about the fact that in AIM 1 we said we would go deeper with our indexing, which means that we probably need more granularity, I guess, or at least generate a couple of domain-specific extensions of that.
I think perhaps sorry.
Go ahead, Susanna.
No, perhaps we need to distinguish between the format we ask external people at any repository to expose, so to be indexed, and the selected one that you are going to target for, a very target in depth. I think these are two different things. I might be wrong, so please others pitch in.
No, I mean I think that's correct. I mean, sort of the low bar, as you put it, right, to get people to provide the metadata, and then there's sort of, for people that, I mean, it's just like what happens with Google and others, right? Most people put the minimal metadata on, and then there's some additional metadata or something that people can provide, and that gives them better rankings or visibility, right? And so getting that minimal metadata is the first step, but if they get additional visibility from additional metadata, then they may do that.
It sort of came up in the earlier core, and it's sort of coming up here again, is that success here means repositories being found more often. And this is like the competing on search engines. Let's get high ranking on our search engines. In my mind, that's not success. Success here means people who need to find data being able to find data, and not, the resource that I developed is more easily findable in a search engine. I mean, NIH's interest and why NIH, it was recommended to NIH that we needed to have data catalogs. But the point there is to serve end users, not to bring more people to particular websites. And so I think we have to have the end users involved. And part of the equation I was talking about earlier, and maybe this is a wrong assumption, but the assumption is that when we talk about the end users, sure, some of the time they're searching for data, but at other times those same people are also producing the data. Probably not the same data. And so they're in this situation of I want to be able to do these searches, but on the other hand, I'm also responsible for providing the data that enables those searches. So it becomes a trade-off that they can make for themselves.
So if I can summarize, I don't hear any negative comment on this direction. Can we conclude that it is okay to explore this direction? And of course, we will have to also understand, as I was telling earlier with Anu and Hua and Jeff, how to cope between helping you to do what you're doing now, but somehow, moving towards this new version here. And so therefore, any documentation. Yeah.
So the thing you're asking about going ahead with is a DATS 3.0 that is more closely aligned with schema.org. That's
yes.
What you're looking for confirmation on.
Yeah, yes, and the existing element and the relation gets simplified, especially reviewing all the pipeline and the import pipeline that has been done.
And my personal answer to that would be yes, that direction makes sense as long as we're surfacing that metadata in DataMed.
Yes, which is something that already is happening with the current version, and what we need also to discuss if it's worth maybe, I don't want to say stop that part of the work, but having it as is, and then move forward with the version 3 before anything else is done. Because there's a lot of activity being done around the current model, including documentation and then, attaching to the landing page and etc. But of course that will become redundant and we need to redo it as there will be a new version. So my suggestion would be that we start focusing on the version 3 as a first item.
So, if, Jeff, if we have a new DAT we do the remapping again, or would it be a simpler
Well, I mean, if I understand
indexing?
from my question before, it seems more like that the core DATs would be smaller, right? But
And everything else still
I mean, I
stays
think
the same, right?
most of the fields currently exist in DATs, right?
Yeah.
Yes,
So-
and especially because you flatten a lot of the relationship, perhaps this might not affect you much. But again, this is perhaps Philippe might know better about this.
Yeah, because I don't think there's any new. I mean, from what I've heard, there's no completely new fields. I mean, they're all sort of.
No. I can't imagine there would be new fields with
exactly.
perhaps. Yeah.
So
Susanna, my question is: are we going to get rid of fields?
That's a good question.
Sorry, I couldn't hear. Get it rid of what?
That is
Field.
that's sort of the question. If someone already has extended information, do we keep that, or? I mean.
I would hope so.
Yeah.
Yes, I think this is the idea. I mean, we would not discard anything that is of relevance to the use case, to the completion of the use case. My recollection of following the inspection of a number of pipelines are twofold, essentially. The first one is that I could see the same type of information mapped in different ways. I'm thinking about, the description of some samples or this kind of things, which means that this drops the recall. And so it is about having a kind of a full overview of how best to represent some of the information, but at the same time, owing to the complexity of some of the richness of the DATS model is a traversal, or the number of relations that we need to build to fetch the data to represent that information from a repository into DATS may be too heavy. So that would be more towards the kind of creation of shortcuts relation or shorter path, so that indexing would be maybe faster or easier. And I would agree with Ian that we need to challenge any simplification that we do with accuracy of the representation. So if people are actually want to query DataMed for sample sizes, for instance, and things like that, does it mean that the target repository need to provide this information, or does it mean that the pipeline for the transformation needs to have the logic to be able to traverse the metadata from the native repository to compute those numbers? These are a kind of sort of value-added processing that can be envisioned.
I mean, thinking back, and I think we're probably thinking back a couple of years here, we had a set of use cases that were originated through that workshop in San Diego, it was at the beginning of 2015, and subsequent work on that. And a sort of line was drawn through those use cases and said, yeah, we can support these use cases, but not these. And that was essentially driven by the metadata, or the level of metadata that we would have. And if we change the model, if we simplify, then the line in the sand about which use cases are possible and which aren't, and I know this is not unidimensional. There's more than one dimension to this. But in general, the more minimal data that you're having, the fewer use cases that you're going to be able to fulfill. So what I hope we're going into this with is the sense that we're still trying to find the right place, the right balancing point of where to draw that line in the sand.
Well, I think there's sort of two balancing points, right? And I think that's what Susanna brought up. There's sort of the balancing point of what will repositories do now in terms of what will they expose in a sort of a standards compliant feed, right? Versus what's the balancing point for what you were mentioning, Ian, sort of the user discoverability part, right? And those two aren't aligned right now.
I was seeing those as the two sides of the balance.
Yeah.
Actually, the one that needed to be balanced against the other, and the balance point is how much is in one pan versus how much is. I'm thinking about the old-fashioned balances, not the single-pan electronic, right?
But maybe it doesn't really matter at this point, since we are saying we're not going to discard any of the metadata fields which have actual metadata in them from repositories, right? I guess where we would be potentially consolidating would be areas which are not populated at all. Is that right?
Yes, but I think that doesn't. I mean, if anything, it clouds the issue because some are more well described than others. But we have to take the lowest common denominator here. When we're focusing on is this enough metadata, we'd have to focus on the ones that have the minimal.
So would it be useful to have I remember that we had some evaluation where we looked, I think Xiaoling looked into which of the fields actually contribute, at least on the search side, to the results, search results. So would it be useful to revisit that?
I'm not sure I'm making the connection.
So when we talk about minimal metadata, I mean, it's one part is what the repositories are providing, right? But the other part is also what is required for searches and retrieval of relevant data sets. So I remember that at a point of time we had done some evaluation where we looked at which of the fields, metadata fields that we have are the ones that contribute maximally to retrieval of relevant results.
So I think advanced search comes into this somehow, and maybe faceted search as well, in that if you think about those use cases that people wanted to fulfill, they were articulating those queries in terms of, well, it was implied in those queries that particular fields were being searched for, right? So if somebody said they were looking for Hodgkin's lymphoma, it meant that they wanted to be querying the disease field specifically. And if you want to formulate your query in that way, you've either got to be using advanced search or be using the facets. Does disease come up as a facet? I can't remember.
I don't think so, not right now. Well, I take that back. That would depend on the repository. Because it might be that in some repositories you get disease as a facet. So, Susanna, what kind of information do you need from the core dev?
Again, I need to ask for Philippe's assistance here. Philippe, I understand you, Alejandro, already have access to the pipeline. So perhaps at this stage you don't need anything for us to initiate a discussion or where we're going to trim and modify, and then we come back to the dev team with a proposal? Or do you need something at this stage?
Yes, we do have access to all the pipelines. We have reviewed some of them, and I think there is also a document that collates all the metadata pulled from the various repositories, so we can contrast that with the pipeline to understand exactly the polymorphism and diversity of. But I think a lot of things have been regularized. But we could again review that and see where things could be simplified, or where are the costs essentially as well to expand the JSON that is currently indexed to make it a full DATS, for instance.
So currently, actually, one of the top priorities for us was to start working on the DATS output via the DataMed API. Firat has been working on it, and Firat, do we have any updates?
Hello. So today we have a mailing with Jeff, and now it's more clear that what we need a mapping from all the models to that .json files. So we are in that phase now. If we have a mapping, then we can dive into writing the code.
Okay, and also this is an update that the BM25 algorithm has been implemented on the production side now, and currently we are actually waiting to get some tweaked learning to rack algorithm from the Emory group. So one of the things that we wanted to talk about is the Geo repository. Jeff, do you want to just briefly outline what we are talking about?
This is related to doing a better job in terms of displaying the secondary and primary data sets, and between ArrayExpress and Geo, we have the sort of primary distributions of what ArrayExpress has from Geo, pointing to Geo. But ArrayExpress and Geo sort of have their, have a different granularity in the sense that Geo has a data set construct, and ArrayExpress is, each of their data sets is really the series itself, and so there's a mismatch. And so, in the interface, to be able to do a better job of listing sort of the cross matches, one way to do that would be also to bring in the Geo series in addition to the Geo data set. So that's sort of the short description. I think I got. I mean, then does that sound?
Yeah.
I think that was the. So on our end, we're looking at Yuling's already looking at the series. So that's just sort of the status there.
So, but if we do bring in the series, we still have to have the relationship in there, right? Between the series and the data set.
Yeah, I mean that's what we. We need to look at the Geo records to see. We can put in the related pieces. So I just need to. We just need to look at the Geo records.
So is this looking at the thread in GitHub on the issue that Jenny raised?
That's right.
The number here.
I think it was number
278.
278.
Okay. I'm not going to comment now. I'll keep in touch with it via the comments on that issue.
Okay.
I mean, Jeff, are you saying? I mean, I think one of my comments was that actually the base data set wasn't actually in there. So GSE, is that a series identifier? GSE?
That's a series identifier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's okay. I'm trying to make the connection. Yeah.
Right. I think one of the issues was that not all series are bundled up in data sets.
Okay. Right. Yeah, I mean, I would call this, whatever they call it, it looks like a data set to me. It's 288 samples.
Yeah, so I mean,
I've learned a lot about ground squirrels in looking at this, I have to tell you. But so that would help us ingest that data set. But the bigger question with this issue seems to me like how we eliminate listing the same data set 4 times. Like once from Geo, once from bioprojects, One's from Array Express, possibly again from Omics DI.
Well, I think that's part of the UI update is to make that more visible on the UI so that they're sort of bundled together.
Right. I think currently we have, from what I understood when Shaolin did it, was that we need to have prior knowledge that two specific, two repositories could potentially have duplicate data sets. And then what we do is look for the flag that we have right now in DataMed from the backend, which comes where it tells you if it's a primary or not. And if it's a duplicate data set and it's not primary, then we assume they are all secondary data sets and they're displayed as such. So we do have a mechanism for displaying it. The only issue is that currently we are not showing all the repositories that do have duplicate data sets. For example, Bioproject was not included. We had Array Express, Gemma, and Geo as a preliminary proof of concept kind of a thing. So in this instance, I guess getting Geo series would solve the issue. But if we have repositories that do get indexed, that have duplicate data sets, we always require prior knowledge, apparently. Is that right?
We need to know, I mean, it has to be, that information has to be somewhere, right? Is that what you're?
No, so what, when I asked Shaolin if there was a way for her, for when we are displaying the results, to look through each of the data sets and to see if there are duplicates based on identifiers or something, she said that would take too much time if the UI, if the search engine has to iterate over each data set looking to see if there are duplicates present.
Right, now on the search engine side, but
yeah,
right.
Potentially you could do that as an offline process.
Yeah.
And then you could keep a sort of a mapping table that says, I think I found this duplicate.
Right. So I know part of this is going to be dependent on the order in which you ingest things, but assuming that, I would hope we ingest Geo before we ingest Omics DI. But when we ingest Omics DI and we find this identifier and say, we've already got that. We've already got GSE, whatchamacallit. And you either make the linkage or ignore the Omics DI or the Array Express or the Bioproject record of that data set. but basically this would be handled when you're ingesting things. So, do we have this already?
Yeah, I mean, it might not be when you're actually doing ingestion, just because depending on how many records you're looking across and what your routines are, it might really slow down.
All right. Somewhere in the pipeline.
So it might be a post-process that runs?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm including all of that.
Yeah, okay.
In how do we, I'm probably inaccurately referring to how do we build the index as ingestion, but I think you're being more specific about what the ingestion step is. Yeah. Right. Ingestion might mean bringing it in wholesale and then working out the duplicates.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're not doing that right now, right, Jeff?
We never wrote any comparator or anything like that. I mean, it's something that can be done. I mean, the question is, with a limited number of sources, right? I mean, we need to find. It really gets down to sort of finding use cases that aren't the direct sort of ID one like we have from Array Express, right? That one I don't, because we could, you could write something to you look at some of the core attributes like title, description, see if there are duplicates.
Because I think if we process that offline, then, displaying it should be fairly straightforward.
I mean, I'm looking at an example, and I think the Array Express, out of the Ground Squirrel example, which is the one in the issue, both the Array Express and the, I think it's the Omics DI instance of it, both have the same ID, which is, it's an Array Express ID. It's EGOD 5414, which I think translates to something like 5414 in Geo.
Right.
But the array out of, I can't see any identifier on the BioProject version of this that you could use to make the connection. I don't know that we're seeing all of the data, but there's nothing on the visible data that would cause me to say this is the same thing, other than the title.
Right. We'd have to sort of write a routine. Then we'd have to, we sort of need a gold standard subset that we could test against, right, to see if it actually, finds the duplicates and see what type of, false positives we get as well.
Okay.
Yeah, even Array Express and Geo are not using, you wouldn't match the ID that they've given it with the Geo ID. You can see the connection. It's GSE 5414. But
right, but there's no, it's not a direct match, right?
Right, it's not the ID that Omics DI or Array Express are using for it. But isn't this at the point where we go back to our identifier scheme that the EBI folks have been involved in?
Potentially. I mean, I in the Geo record, well, it depends if they have if they have that identifier somewhere else in the record. I can't recall now or not.
The Array Express has it?
Yeah. Or yeah. So I mean, I'd have to check. I don't know if they do or not. But I mean, you know. Because otherwise, I mean, if it's not the direct ID, you know, they have the sort of the mangled ID, like the Array Express ID itself.
Yeah, well, the Array Express...
That's a tough one to, I mean, you know, there are a lot of data sets that have only numeric identifier pieces, right?
Well, the Array Express page has GSE 51414.
Right. So then it's So then if it's in the data set, yeah, then you'd be able to do that. But for others that don't, right?
So, is this something that we can look into to see how to resolve it?
To resolve which piece of it? I mean, for the data mismatch. I mean, that is getting at the Geo series, right?
Yeah.
But what other? And that's already sort of annotated in the
Geo series.
And that's annotated in the Array Express distribution. So what would be what else needs to be resolved just for the Geo?
The bio project. Linkages.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. So the bio project, yeah, okay, that would be, yeah, we can look at bio project, yeah.
And for Omics TI, we are planning to remove.
To separate those, yeah.
Yeah, separate those, right? Okay, I think we're almost finished with the RR. Is there any other issue that we want to talk about today?
Just a quick one as Omics DI has come up. Last week, Henning said, it was either Henning or Yasset said, there's some, you've been talking, i.e. BioCaddy, has been talking to some of the repositories that they've not talked to. And I think they had their eye on a small number of repositories that they were saying, well, could you share your metadata about those repositories? And I said, well, that's something we could consider. But that's something I've just planted the seed as something to think about. I don't think we can address that right here and now.
Okay.
Especially as there isn't time.
So maybe we can discuss this next time. If there's nothing else for now, then thank you all for calling in. And we'll talk to all of you again next week.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye.